I see the screen. This is Yvette, but I see it in one language, and I'm just transferring it over to the next language. And want to say welcome to everyone. Buenas noches. It's my pleasure to be here today with all of you that could attend and sharing space and collaboration with the LJ team and the leadership. And so thank you for the opportunity today. Today we'll be talking about Cultivemos Accessible Network, and we'll spend some time talking about the introduction of P.O.U.R, P-O-U-R, and we'll dive into that shortly. We're asking that if anyone has a question or a comment, that you will please unmute yourself or raise your hand, because we are piloting a dual language slide sharing. It will be much more accessible to manage being able to hear people ask a question by unmuting and or raising their hand rather than having to keep looking at the chat. However, if something is not an urgent thing, it could definitely be on the chat, and then we will get to it in a little while. Is that okay? And if that's okay, you could put thumbs up or little hearts, little emojis, and I will be looking at my screen. You also will be seeing me look at another screen as a person with a disability. It is important for me to look away from the screen at times, given my vision impairment and cognitive. And so a little bit about me. I've been with Cultivemos since the very beginning, a little bit over 3 years, it feels like. And I've been in the journey of all the ups and downs and plateaus, and it's been an amazing experience. And I am super excited that we are here talking about accessibility today. Given the one-on-one surveys, given the research, given all the feedback that individuals and the network provided, this is a gift as a result of that, so that we are all on the same page. And so with that, we can move on to the next slide, please. And I've already done the welcome and the introduction. And at this time, what I would like is for who is here present today to share the land that they are representing or that they are at, their pronouns, and maybe one thing that you hope to get as a result of the session today. And again, I'm Yvette, I'm in Quinnipiac land, and what I hope to give and receive is information about how people with disabilities live, and things that I can even do to improve on how to accommodate others. And I'll pass it along and popcorn it to Angel.
La palabra a Angel.
This is Angel.
Es Angel.
I am on Lenape land in
Yo estoy en territorio Lenape.
and I am really excited to see how I can incorporate more of the like accessibility practices in our cohort leads meetings at Cultivemos. And I will popcorn it to Michi. This is Angel. I'm not sure if Michi heard the prompt, but it was to share your the land that you're on and something you're looking to get out of the session.
This is Michi speaking. I am located on ancestral Lenni Lenape land, also called Philadelphia. And I'm hoping to learn how to further ground myself in accessibility. Thank you. This is Michi. I'm now going to pass the mic over to Marta.
Hola, buenas tardes. Es Marta.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Estoy
This is
en la
Marta,
tierra ocupada
and I'm
de la
occupied
Dakota,
Cornell Lakota lands,
la banda Chippewa,
Lakota,
pidiéndoles que me den permiso para estar en la tierra
asking
que
you
está siendo
permission
ocupada
asking
de
them to
ellos.
be
Y
permission
esta
to
noche
be in their
quisiera
occupied
aprender
land.
más
And tonight I would
cómo
like to learn more
comunicarme, cómo
about how
presentar
to
información de una
communicate and how to
manera que
present
es realmente
information
accesible.
in a way that is truly
Mucho gusto de
accessible.
estar aquí.
So I'm very glad to be here,
Y le
Dr.
paso
Yvette.
a Hannah.
And I pass it on to Hannah.
Muchas gracias, Marta.
Thank
Hi,
you so
everyone.
much,
My name is
Marta.
Hannah. I am currently residing on the ancestral homelands of the Tohono O'odham and Pasquayaqui tribes, also known as Tucson, Arizona. And I am looking forward today to learning more about accessibility, about language surrounding accessibility, and then tools and resources to provide that more in my volunteer work with the Southern Arizona Young Farmer and Ranchers Coalition. Thank you. And I will go ahead and pass it on to, is it Asili?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
It's Izili's respite. It's both Titan and Kansu here from the farm. It's Kansu. I use he, him pronouns. We are on traditional Abenaki land, also known as Groton, Vermont. And out of this session, hoping to get ways to bring accessibility into our community of relief and into the online work we do, and communicate better about what's needed for people with accessibility. Titan.
Hello, my name is Titan. Use he, him pronouns. I'm here on ancestral homeland of the Abenaki people, and really looking forward to Felice becoming more aware of some places that I'm not even aware of, how I can make the work we do more accessible in the world. So looking forward to learning. Thank you. And let's see, we can pass to
Selena.
This is Angel. Elena is
Okay.
interpreting for us, so I think that you are the last participant who doesn't
Okay.
have a critical role, but I appreciate it. I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Yvette.
Thank you so much for the participation and for sharing. I'm going to move us to our next slide, please. And before I do that, I just want to acknowledge that I am working out of my farm, and there might be outside ducks that may quack or cluck or make the noise that they make, or chickens at some point, or even the dogs. if they hear the farm manager working in some projects outside. So if there's any noise that gets on the way of you all hearing me, please let me know and I'll do the very best that I can to accommodate and modify. With that, I want to do the session overview. And so to today's session, our goal is to cover 4 different areas. And we've already done the opening by the amazing LJ team. We've done the welcome and introductions. We're going to talk a little bit about goals and the accessibility foundations. Accessibility foundations are specifically and were created for web design and web use. However, I find that they are instrumental and very, very helpful when also using them as a guide to all the work we do with accessibility. And I'll explain more when we get to those pieces. This will then help us to create the accessible experiences within Cultivemos, but also outside of our communities. As some of you shared during the sharing process, we may work with online communities, we may work with our local communities, we may have a hybrid combination and approach. And so the goal is that you will leave today's session with a refresher at a minimum, or at least learning 1 or more things that you did not know when you first came in. And we're going to wrap it up with some next steps and an action plan. I'm going to give you all some homework. As an educator and for many, many years, I enjoy giving people actionable steps to take back so that they can apply what they're learning in theory. It's very different to do things in theory and put it into application. And I also would end with some resources and take some questions. Next slide, please. Anyone would like to read today's goals? I can't see people on the other end while I am presenting. So if there's a hand up, just feel free to unmute if you would like to read our goals for today. Any takers?
This is Angel. I've never wanted to read anything more. So I see the goals. The first goal is foster shared understanding of accessibility across the network. Goal 2, empower cohort leads to create and maintain accessible experiences. And 3, raise awareness of accessibility best practices across the Cultivemos network.
Great. Gracias, Angel. Next slide, please. We're going to kick this off and we're going to talk about accessibility and the foundation. This will be an interactive activity. And what we're going to do is we're going to break into 3 small groups, and each group will be given a question, and they will be, I'll let the LJ team and Angel sort of provide direction around how the groups will be divided and the instructions with that. In short, everyone will have access to 1 question that you will get to answer together. And then we're going to debrief that to begin our conversation about the foundations of accessibility, what it means.
This is Angel. I actually wonder if you would be fine with us staying in this main room since we just have a few people here tonight. I think it could be
Perfect.
to hear what everyone has to say.
That would be amazing. I love that idea. Thank you, Angel. Okay, so let's start with the first question. Accessibility means a lot of things to a lot of people. It can be accessibility as we have been used to working with the language justice. It could be accessibility around native language, interpretation, and translation. Accessibility could mean also accommodations for someone that may have some type of disability. Now, I want to hear from the team, if you could please unmute yourself. When you think about accessibility, can you define some key concept? What is, in one sentence, define what accessibility means to you in your cohort or in your community, in your spaces? And I will not popcorn it this time. We'll take one question at a time. And whoever would like to share, we will invite you to share at this time, please. So what is accessibility to you?
This is Titan. I think of accessibility as the result of designing spaces, virtual or physical or any space, with the goal that everyone can be included. So to me, it's a result of that effort and that intention.
Thank you. Who else would like to add?
This is Hannah. To me, accessibility is finding a common ground where people can understand to what Titan said and reduce barriers that might prevent someone from being included in a space.
Thank you. One more.
Esta es Marta. Para mí, accesibilidad
For me, accessibility
significa participación.
means participation.
Yeah. Activa, presente.
Active, present participation.
Gracias, Martha. And as we heard, thank you all for sharing, accessibility means different things to different people. It can mean screen accessibility, it could mean a safe space, it could be language, it could be a space where we are being inclusive of everyone. I'm not sure if you, any of you have heard of a saying that says, you could invite me to the party, but it doesn't mean that I am actually there. I'll take that a little bit step further. So I can be invited to a party and be left in a corner just because it was the due diligence and the check off the box of I invited Yvette. But if I am left in the corner, completely ignored, not included in the activities of the party or in the dialogue or collaboration, then am I really being included? So thinking about, when we think about accessibility, as Martha said, it's sort of bringing the whole person in all ways. So accessibility is finding ways, it's a way of life, and it is a way to remove any barriers so that a person with some limitations can be seen for their abilities and not their limitations. Anyone would like to add before I move on to the second question? I can read the chat or see hands. So again, I will ask if you would like to join us and participate. We would love that. If you could unmute and speak, we will love that.
Hi, this is Kansu. When I assess accessibility, I ask some of the same questions in terms of active present participation, but it's, can I feel safe, capable, and welcome in this space?
Thank you for that. Very true. Yes, thank you. Why does it matter? Why does accessibility matter? Why do feeling safe in a space matter? For all beings, for all folks with abilities, but particularly for those who have limitations. Who would like to answer that? Why does it matter?
This is Kansu. I'll pop in right quick. In the same ways that sometimes we talk about different identities, liberation, meaning the liberation of all people, I think thinking about what it means for people who are disabled to have complete access also increases the access for people who may be considered able-bodied. There's an equity piece there, and that if we all have the opportunity also, then things become more equitable. Check there.
Thank you. Anyone else? Why does it matter?
This is Hannah. I think it matters because you're creating a space where everyone can be affirmed in their identities and in their humanness. And it also encourages people to show up as they are. So, yeah, they can be affirmed in those spaces.
Thank you. So as a person with a disability, for me, it matters in multiple ways because I'll share a little bit about my personal story and put into concept why it matters to me, and others are more than welcome to share as we prepare and set up the space to talk about real world examples. In 2020, in my way to assist survivors and victims of Hurricane Isaias, working as the disability integration leader for the National American Red Cross and FEMA, I fell and hit my head against 3 trees, suffering a brain injury that changed my life forever. I lost my ability to speak. I lost my sight. I lost my mobility. I lost my memories. And it put me in a very, very dark space, in a place that I consider death over life. As a person with over 20 years of college, I ended up being a 4th grader. Despite cognitive therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, vision therapy, speech therapy, it just left me in a very, very dark space. And I could not admit that I had a disability up into very recently. I really struggle with that social, ethical, new version of me, because I could no longer do many of the things that I once did. And so it matters to me because there is an intersectionality between a Latina woman, a single mom, a farmer, now a person with a disability. And so I describe intersectionality like an onion. An onion has many layers, and the more you peel back, the more layers sometimes it seems that there are. And as human beings, we have all of those layers, all of those identities. And when we think about accessibility or disabilities, since COVID-19, there are many more people with disabilities than ever before because of long COVID. And so people struggle, people who have been in marginalized, historically marginalized groups have suffered already in the social justice movement. But someone with a disability data and science tells us that they suffer even more. And so it matters to be able to see the person as they are and as they describe, and to meet the person where the person is at. If you looked at me today, most people see me as a whole able body. They can't see my invisible disability. In the workforce in 2022, studies indicate that close to 5% of the workforce has a disability, whether it's cognitive, whether it's mental, whether it's physical. There are different types. And so it matters for the person, for them to be seen as the whole person, not how we want to view them. And so I invite you that when you think about why does it matter when we look at people, when we provide services, to think about how does that look like? What does that look like in a community, in the individual setting, as a trainer, as an educator? It matters because we don't want just one part of me to be seen. We want you to see the whole person. Does that make sense? Give me some emojis and let me know if that makes sense. And then we're going to move to real world examples. I've given you a little bit of my journey. One example I will share is when I went through, oh, love the hearts, thank you. When I went through this tragedy turned into hope, I suffered a lot. I suffered food injustice, mental health issues, accessibility issues, and it impacted me as a farmer and as a human being, because people saw the outside shell but didn't know inside what I was going through, therefore denied services to me, or thought I was faking it, or thought I was exaggerating it. And so I want to just showcase that accessibility impacts people every day. For example, when someone gave me the application to apply for the farm number, I was completely overwhelmed when they told me, go to the website, and in the website, you'll find form A, B, and C. Complete it. Once we receive it, we'll call you and you have a farm number. Well, someone with a cognitive disorder and low vision can't do that. I needed help. I needed someone to literally sit with me and be able to go through the application, help me understand it, and even help me write it. And so that is a real world example where in our work, when we constantly have forms for grants and for reports and for settings and for data, that we keep in mind that providing accessibility is really important in order for people to live an impactful, successful life, because we can't. It's just sometimes we think that the path ahead is straightforward. But sometimes for us, we just have to go around it, but we still get there. Who would like to share a world example based on themselves or a community they represent, or even someone they've worked with? I'll open up the space.
This is Angel. I don't know if this is a like coherent example, but something that I've been thinking about a lot as you've been talking is like this tension in agricultural spaces around like kind of like toughing it out and like pushing your body really hard versus like, and how that can, I think, make a lot of ag spaces kind of ignore the like possibilities of like adaptive modifications to like the way we work. Because there's this like, and this is obviously depends on community to community and like space to space, but I feel like there's this overarching like pride and kind of like hurting your body And I think not only is it like harmful to anyone, and it like is really, I think, diminishing of folks with disabilities who like may actually not be able to like move their bodies in the ways that like the agricultural field like prides itself in, and like kind of, yeah, serves to like dismiss and invisibilize like the real ways in which people with like a wide variety of disabilities could still participate in agriculture. And so I think about that a lot.
Thank you, Angel. That resonates with me as a farmer, because there are a lot of things that have to be done differently, and a lot of accommodations and adaptations in order for me to be able to function as a farmer. Even to function as a consultant or a presenter. And so acknowledging that in our cohorts, in our community groups, with our team members, it's really important, because sometimes we speak in general terms because we want to be inclusive and we want to be intentional. But maybe sometimes people don't disclose when they can do something or they can't, you know. In a lot of the surveys, a lot of information I got back stated that I just have not sure in my cohort that I need an accommodation or that I have a disability, because sometimes I may not even know what I need. Sometimes I just don't want to share with the world. And so we don't wear a sign on our heads that says disabled. And so treating people where people are at with empathy and love is really, really, really important. Before we take another example, I want to ask the question, who here has ever heard of the golden rule? And unmute yourself and let us know if you've heard of the golden rule.
I think yes. Treat others as you would have them treat you.
Okay, yes, you get a star. Thank you. Okay, how many people here have ever heard of the platinum rule? Okay, well, I'm going to introduce you to the platinum rule. One that I've used so many times in my 30-year track of DEI work. DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The platinum rule states that we should treat everyone as they need to be treated, as they wish to be treated. Because as much as I would love to treat Martha the way that I would love to be treated, the reality is I don't know all of Martha. I don't know what Martha's needs are. I don't know Martha's history. I don't know Martha's background. I don't know if Martha can utilize bigger fonts or a screen reader or can see color. And so if I just take the time to build trust in a relationship in my teams and with cohort members and in my community, and then I'm able to say, Martha, what are your specific needs? And I may learn very quickly that Martha's needs and desires are very different than mine. Does that make sense? Yeah, I grew up always learning from the Bible. You gotta treat, and you know, one time somebody said to me, a native indigenous gentleman who was doing training said to me, no, I'm a guy, I'm a big guy. I believe in Mother Earth. I believe in the bird clan. I believe in earth medicine. Whereas most people that he did training for did not believe in the same things that he believed in. And so really important to be mindful that when we hear people examples and hear people's stories or needs, that we right away don't jump into, okay, I know what Angel needs or Hannah needs, without taking a moment to say, Hannah, what do you need? How can I make this space inclusive and safe for you? And so now you know the platinum rule. Any other examples? We had some good conversation, but I would love to hear another example of how accessibility impacts people's lives every day in agriculture, whether it's a migrant worker, whether it's a farmer, a farm manager, whether you're an educator, whether you're a cohort lead. How does it impact us? Maybe one more.
This is Hannah. I really appreciate both of the examples that you and Angel provided, and I'll share a personal real world example. 2 years ago, I was temporarily disabled and broke my foot to the point where it required surgery and 3 months essentially non-walking. And it changed the way that I viewed the built environment around me, because it was very obvious that I could not go upstairs without mechanical assistance. I couldn't shower on my own. It was really challenging. So in agriculture, I very much see how, as an able-bodied person, we move around without thinking and without paying much attention to accessibility on land and the tools that we provide. Ranch hands, farm hands, people who are assisting us with labor, or very much, at the center of manual labor. So kind of to Angel's point, really tending to the whole person and making sure that we are aware of all of the needs outside of our own able bodies, if we are, and how that the physicalness of our work changes. Well, our bodies change over time, and so those needs and assistance that we need, adapting them to meet the needs of individuals.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for that valuable information to add to what was already shared. When we begin to think of our workforce or our community or our team members, so important to be mindful of what their needs may be, but oftentimes we don't ask. Oftentimes, if we see people are functioning well, operating well, coming in early, leaving late, people always say to me, how do you do it? Well, I wear braces on my legs because it's hard for me to walk sometimes. I have accessible beds. All of my growing beds are 36 inches above the ground. As a result of my injury, I started a therapeutic farm for people with disabilities. And we're a demo site where I teach people how to create accessible growing spaces for people with all abilities. And so for me, all of our beds are 36 inches above the ground, so people don't have to bend. Bending is difficult for a lot of people. A lot of people think it's only difficult for old people. I'm up there in age, and I have to say that before my injury, I still did not like bending down too much because it still hurt my knees. Now it really hurts my knees, but that's besides the point. So accessibility impacts people in agriculture if they have different limitations. For people that might have fatigue, they might need to be able to work a bed by sitting next to the bed rather than squatting or kneeling. They can still do the work, but they might have to be able to do it a little bit differently. For people that may have a broken leg, they may need to elevate the leg out half part of the day because it's swelling too much, because they've been on it too much. And so very small things impacts us and impacts people. It doesn't mean they can't do the work. It just means that we have to find ways around it. Thank you for sharing. Let's move on. When you look at this picture, take a few moments to look at this picture. And think about the conversation we were just having about accessibility, about disability, about why does it matter? What does it look like in agriculture? You know, these conversations can be exhausting, can be draining, can be very, very tiring. Is there any particular blob here that you can resonate and relate with when you're thinking about, wow, we're talking about disability again, or diversity, either because you don't know enough, or it's a conversation that doesn't happen enough, or is it because, you know, there are so many needs out there and we're not doing anything about it? And we, I mean, in general speaking, not Cultivemos or us, but in general. So for me, I relate and resonate with the little blob number 13, because sometimes I just shake my head, like when I say to people, can you please communicate with me? The best way I communicate is via audio text or audio messaging, because I don't know how many people here have a 2-hour limit on their eyesight, but I have a 2-hour limit on screen time before I start getting migraines and cognitively get overloaded, and it becomes difficult. And so when I say to people, I am not able to check my email regularly, I have a disclosure at the bottom, the best way to communicate with me is this way. I'm often puzzled and cross my arms to say, they don't get it, because I later get an email that says, I emailed you 2 weeks ago, you still have not answered. We're still waiting on a response. And so what have you seen or experienced that can resonate with this conversation and some of the blob characters that you see here? And why do you select that one? For me is, wow. And then it gives me the opportunity to say, I need to do better to re-educate and help people understand why I need audio messaging and text messaging. And so I feel like part of this is my job to teach others what I need, because they don't know if they've not experienced it. And so looking at the blobs, who would like to pick one and talk about how, when we're having this conversation, how does it make you feel? We have all kinds of little blobs here.
Exil, si quieres, puedo esperar.
Marta,
¿Ok?
I
¿Está
can
bien?
wait. You want to go ahead?
Yes, it's okay. Okay, so it's Marta.
Okay, this is
El
Marta.
número 10, number 10. Porque me
Number
alegra
10. Number 10,
ver que
because
haya
it brings me joy
personas de esto, que
that
hay
there
gente
is
que está haciendo el
people
trabajo.
who are doing the
Porque
work,
muchas veces he
because
estado en el
many
número
times
13, ¿no?
I've
Y hay
been
cosas que
number
para mucha
13,
gente
which
es una
for
molestia,
a lot of
cosas
times
chiquiticas
is
como cambiar
a
el tamaño de la
bother
letra de los
or
documentos, ¿no?
something like
El
changing the
tamaño de la
size of
letra en tus
text
emails.
or the size of the
Asegurarte que
text
son
and emails,
accesibles
even making sure that
y
they're
el tipo
accessible and
de
readable,
fuente que usas, el tipo de letra que
and
usas,
making sure that the
hasta
font we
las
use, even that,
imágenes,
as
la
well
manera
as
que
the
hablamos,
images and
la
the
manera
captions we
que nos
provide,
preparamos para una
the
reunión,
ways that we
cómo nos
prep for
sentamos.
meetings,
Entonces, me
um,
alegra
how
ver
we
que
check
estos
in.
esfuerzos continúan
I like to
y que
see
no
that
soy
these
sola.
efforts continue and deepen and that I'm not
Cuando me
alone.
siento número 13
Because
cuando me
when
siento
I
sola,
feel
que
like
soy
13 is when I
la
feel
única que está
alone,
hablando de esto.
like I'm the only one
el ver
talking
el
about this,
concurso,
but
doctor Ibe,
to see
me
this
pone en el
effort,
número 10.
Dr. Eve puts me on number 10.
Miles gracias, Marta.
Thousand thank yous, Martha.
¿Quién más? Who else?
This is Hannah. I think I resonate with number 11, and the reason being because I do my best to lend support when I can and in the ways that others need when those needs are vocalized, but also just lending support in in the best way that I can. So I think trying to be a friend and someone that people can lean on is what resonates to me in number 11.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Who else would like to pick a blob? Maybe someone who hasn't had the opportunity to share floor space with us. Or as Michi will say, who hasn't had a turn with the mic. Who can we give the mic to?
This is Titan, and it feels vulnerable to share that I can identify with blob number 19, which is somebody who's really had the privilege of being able to like climb to the high branches, in both beautiful metaphorical ways that, you know, and also just in like really practical ways that is, anyway, 19. I'm somebody who has had the privilege of being able to move in spaces as they are designed currently in very inaccessible ways for many. And I care very much about wanting to have people I love around me be part of that with me. And I think for me, I have seen moments where I have, in my desire to have folks meet me where I am starting from, has put them at risk. That's what I can relate to. And I think being willing to acknowledge that and to slow down and to say, just because we're not at this branch at the same rate I'm used to getting there, doesn't mean we won't be at the top branch together. So thanks.
Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. I don't know that it's very common or often that people see the privilege of being a full able body. I know that for me, I can honestly say I took it for granted. I never knew how much I used my eyes into my accident. Like something as common as that. Like I use my eyeballs from the moment I get up to the moment I go to sleep. And it wasn't until I started getting intense pain and loss of vision that I was like, oh, wow, I really didn't appreciate my sight then the way I appreciate it today. Being able to walk to the mailbox without having any type of fatigue or discomfort. Now it's a little different. And so I realized that I have privilege then, and somehow that has changed. And so now I view the world through that lens. And so thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that, and also recognizing that sometimes the spaces that are okay for us and safe for us may not be safe for someone else. So thank you so much, because you just demonstrated the platinum rule, right? And so thank you for that. Anyone else has any comments or want to pick a blob before we move on to the next slide? Okay, I want to do.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, yeah, thank you for this tree. It's helpful to like think of oneself in different positions. Like I've been 13, I've been 14, and I think I'm trying to stay somewhere between 6 and 12. So thank you.
Tell me a little bit more between 6 and 12, please. I love that.
6, I want to keep reaching for that. And like 12, I want to keep being able to lean on people that like have actually been able to bring me to that point. But also to be open enough to keep reaching for that assistance as well. And ideally get somewhere up there with like 16, 17, and 18, I guess. But 6 and 12.
Okay, thank you for that. And so I'm going to pick on the number 19 for 1 minute. When people look at number 19, can you unmute yourself and say, what do you see? What do you think 19 represents?
Este es Marta. Oh,
Yeah, no, go ahead, Martha.
oh, no, perdón, no, this time you,
No.
please.
I see fear. I see a little bit of complacency. I feel there's a lot there. I'd love to hear other thoughts too.
Thank you.
Esta es Marta. Parece que 19
This is
se
Martha.
está
For me, it
tratando
seems
de
that
alcanzar
19
14.
is trying to get to 14,
Está
trying to reach down to
cayendo.
14, who seems to be falling.
Anyone else? What do you think 19 represents? What does it represent to you visually?
It's sorry, this is Kansu. It's just really curious because I had an exact opposite reaction of like I see now how you see 19 reaching for 14, but I also see 19 dropping 14. So there's that I guess that tells us like different headspaces also. So
And for me, I felt that they held both, that they had lifted up and maybe have also dropped, and that they hold that complexity.
Yes, there's always, in all the times that I've used this activity, there is the perception of some that 19 just pushed over 14. And so it's all about perception or what we perceive, right? And our brains play different roles. This is going to be a great segue for our next slide. We are going to talk about the introduction of P.O.U.R. And again, for those that were not here at the very beginning, P.O.U.R is a set of pillars or principles that were designed primarily for websites and networks that were operational remotely or in screens or in technology. My apologies, my dog is barking at somebody outside. Can you all still hear me? Okay, great. I believe that we can use P.O.U.R in any aspect of the work that we do when we're thinking about accessibility, even when we are creating a PowerPoint, even when we're having a Zoom meeting, even when we're having a small one-on-one in-person group. Because as long as we remember the P, the O, the U, and the R, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, we will be able to be mindful of what others may need in spaces, okay? So in order to have an accessible network, these principles are intended to have an inclusive design of whatever that space is. And the goal is that this will be beneficial for all abilities. I often tell people that I work with around web access is that if you can create a website or a program or a curriculum that is accessible for everyone with the lens of disabilities, then anyone can benefit from that product. However, if you do it the other way around and remove disability from it, what happens is then you work backwards and you create a curriculum or a program or a website that then you have to come back and add the disability, the accessibility, the accommodation lens. And so if we start from the very beginning, then we avoid having to go backwards. So P is for perceive. It's sort of that what we perceive, and is the introduction of what we each perceive and see can be very, very different. So perceivable is for information and the user interface. It is the components that make up what you're presenting, okay? That could be an image, that could be text, that could be captions. For example, many people benefit from using the closed caption that is available when you're watching a movie, or when you have a Google Meets team meeting, or when you have Zoom. Closed caption is a way that with somebody like myself, that sometimes I just have to put myself on mute. I just have to block it all off. It still gives me the idea to take it in and be able to read it without having to hear it. Or some people need to hear it and not see it. When you think about perceivable things, think about your ability to see, feel, taste, touch, your senses. So when you're creating things, think about how others perceive the information by using their senses. This is how we take this principle from the web network and make it useful for everything that we do. So if someone can't see it, can they hear it? If they can't hear it, can they touch it? If they can touch it, can they speak it? Does that make sense? Operable. And the O is for the interface or the components of navigating certain systems. In this case, I wanted to have fidelity to the definitions of P.O.U.R. I add my own stuff when it comes to other design, but again, P.O.U.R. was designed for websites and those type of platforms. But in that space, we think about keyboards. So not everyone uses a mouse to navigate a website. There are some people with accommodation needs and all they use is their keyboard. I use a screen reader, and my screen reader is often speech to text or text to speech. And so when I'm thinking of creating certain things for my community, I need to be able to think about what for today's training, if people can read it, can I read it for them? If they can read it and maybe not understand it, can I explain it to them? If they need an example, can I provide that? So I'm constantly thinking about a way to take what I'm presenting or talking about and look at the interface on how people navigate. And everyone navigates things a bit differently. Some people navigate or take in information through their eyes, some by hearing, some by both. And so it is meeting the person where the person is at. So when you are creating curriculum, when you are creating a space for people, is it operable? Is it working? One thing that the language justice team does really well amongst many things, is that at the beginning of every session that I have been in, the language justice team practices and prepares. Make sure that all the technical pieces are working, that people are on the same page, that the PowerPoints are on point. Taking it a step back to make sure that it's functioning right for the team. Not assuming that is what works for one person, for Francie, is going to work for Joel. It is, how does it work together? I'm going to pause for a minute and see if there are any questions or clarification that I need before I go to my next one. Okay, let's move on to the next slide and let's talk about understandable. When you're thinking about understandable, is the information I'm putting out there relatable to you? I'll use an example of language. We are very familiar with language. Just because I'm putting something out there and I'm putting the information out there does not mean I understand it. Even when it is the same exact language. Let's take, for example, reading levels. If you write something in a 4th grade level, 6th grade level, or higher ed level, you may have different groups of people that understand it very differently. Some may understand it clearly, some may not understand it at all. So using plain language, whether you're creating a Zoom meeting, whether you're creating a Google Docs, whether you're creating a website, using very plain language that usually 6th grade level is the midpoint or the happy point where it is a safe space in which to create and create whatever it is, the presentation, the message, the training. It is being able to understand that when we receive information, that it is, I always tell people, pretend I'm a 4th grader. Well, you have, pretend I'm a 4th grader, I don't get it. If it's not saying that you're dumbing things down, it's not saying that at all. It's just starting at a point where everybody can understand and have shared meaning. And once we have shared meaning and we can understand, then we can build upon that. Language means many things. It's both spoken and unspoken. And even with that, because of the perceived messages, we have to be very careful. When I chose the little blog that I chose that looked like this, a lot of people think that that meant bad, not in this group, in general, that means annoyed or disappointed, or how could you? Well, it did to me, but it also meant curiosity, an opportunity to educate others, an opportunity to provide information in a space that is understandable for the people receiving it. And anytime you have more than 2 people in a room, the information that you put out there may be perceived very differently. So you do the very best that you can when you are in community spaces, when you are in agricultural spaces, when you are in remote spaces, to be mindful that you do the best of your ability to understand the group that you're working with so that they understand your messages. And the R, robust. And in terms of robust, it is sort of the content that it is strong enough that it can be interpreted reliable, that is reliable. What do I mean by that? A lot of people use information to help them, or tools to help them navigate reading, writing, hearing. And some people use all of it together. When I am in cognitive overload, what helps me a lot is to be able to have my applications read the text to me while I am following it. Because it's not only being read, I'm able to hear it, I'm able to follow it. And it is simple enough that when the application is trying to pick things up with any assistive technology that I'm using, that is not confusing. So using basic text and following the standards of accessibility, which I'll give you in a little while in our resources. That's a whole new training. That's a whole other training of 8 hours. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that. But let me make an example here. Sometimes we live in a culture where when we write, we use big capital letters to show emotion or anger or disappointment or happiness or joy. Well, using a tool that reads to me, it doesn't understand the capital and the big words. And so it can sometimes create difficulties or spell out an error message because it doesn't understand. There's a hierarchy in websites and in development in remote spaces where you have headings, you have subheadings, you have bold, you have non-bold, and there is specific practice for that. But this is not going to be a web design class, so we're not going to talk about that. But just to give you an idea, when you're creating documents and you're creating emails, think about the people that you're working with. Can you create an email and send it out to the group that has clear headings, that has clear divisions between one and the other? Does it have plain language? Does it have an example when it needs to be? Does it have a whole bunch of emojis? Emojis are not translated all the time with all assistive technology tools. With some, they are, but with some, they're not. And so creating a robust content that can be interpreted in a reliable way, in a strong way, in a way that has fidelity to what you mean. Think about the people that use assistive technology tools to be able to follow you and to work with you, and think about, is it in the most basic form so that people can understand? How many of you noticed when we started the PowerPoint, the text under each of the cover picture? Did anybody catch that? On the cover, first slide of the PowerPoint, there were 2 pictures. What was under those 2 pictures? I did that intentionally. I didn't put the picture here intentionally to see what people remember. What was there was an explanation under each of the logos that just simply said, Cultivemos logo, Healing by Growing Farms logo. So another example is how you use P.O.U.R. is when you have images, when you have pictures. It is a way for you to create text under that provides the information in a way that is clear and understandable. So if I have low vision or I'm blind, I will be able, my assistive tool can then pick up the text. Well, I might not be able to see it, I can hear it. And so that is what P.O.U.R. stands for. And so I would like to take a minute and go back a slide to the P.O. And I would like to have one person share on P and provide feedback. Share what is your take on perceivable. Have another person then share an operable, and we're going to do the same thing on U and R. Anyone could take a moment and start when you're ready.
This is Hannah. I can think of an example, not that I have personally used, but in a lot of social media, there will be that alternative text at the bottom of pictures that includes something like slide 1 description, slide 2 description, so that those assisted audio technologies can describe what they are to the viewer. Is that what you're looking for? That okay.
Thank you. That is a perfect example. Social media. Many of us in our groups have a social media platform. As part of our websites, as part of our trainings, we always direct people to go to our website, and we have this. So that is great example. Thank you so much, because unless it is described, what I may perceive like the blouse may be something very different. So we want to be clear, and we want to be able to show strong fidelity of what we want people to understand. Thank you, Hannah. That was great. Who would like to give an example on operable?
This is Angel. I can give maybe an example of like something that's not operable that I see a lot, which is when like a website, you have to like scroll endlessly instead of having separate pages. That's something that I don't have any visual impairments, but I also find it really hard to use generally. And yeah, I've heard that it's also really incompatible with a lot of like assistive devices.
Thank you for that. And so how would this relate, Angel? I'm going to pick on you since you brought this up. How would this relate to a website versus a cohort meeting, providing something that is operable, that may have a similar interface of the one that you're talking about?
This is Angel. If I'm understanding you correctly, I would maybe like discourage folks from sharing like websites that aren't functional in that way. And also if you like are trying to share material with your cohort, for example, that is only available on a website of that nature, like making sure that you are available to like read out loud what's on the website if someone else can't use the device, or like share the text separately would be two ideas I have. Is that what you're?
Yes, awesome. Thank you. And I would like to add, if you were doing that in print format, for example, if you were creating a curriculum or a flyer, you know, we have a lot of projects that we do with Cultivemos funds. So let's say you were creating a project that had multiple steps, and within those multiple steps, there were sub steps and little steps. How can you create a project that is operable, that makes sense to everyone, that has a navigation of clearly step 1, step 2, step 3, minimizing 20 steps? So you're creating a roadmap that is functional, that people can navigate. So this can apply to remote, virtual spaces, but it can also help us when we're doing emails, when we're doing projects and letters and this such. You see how it can transfer and be helpful in one way or the other? Thank you for that. Let's move on now to the U and the R. And let's get an example of U and one of R, please. So when we're creating an agenda for a cohort meeting, what does understandable look like? what would it look like? What could it look like in your next meeting? Let's someone talk about how does your agenda or your initial beginning of meeting is understandable to the rest of the team. Being mindful that not everyone that has limitations or disability requests an accommodation or says that they have an accessibility need. Who would like to speak? And if you don't lead a cohort in whatever capacity that you're in, please share.
Hi, this is Kansu. I am a cohort co-lead. In terms of thinking about our agendas going forward, I'm thinking about ways to kind of have real sections planned out and also time so that people know what they're supposed to be paying attention to or thinking about, at least in a certain time frame. And like, even if thoughts wander with brain fog or whatnot, that like somebody could be able to be like, oh, we're in this area of the meeting, like maybe I can ask a question that brings me back to what's going on here, even if I've maybe lost the thread a little bit. So that's what I'm thinking about, is like real time blocks and like clear headings about what's going on.
That is a perfect example. Yes. Particularly for some people that have cognitive disorders, it is really, or ADHD or any neurological type of cognitive piece, it's easier to have clear focus so that I understand from the very beginning what is expected of me, what does that mean, how much time do I have, is there an opportunity to ask questions at the end? So that is amazing. That is an amazing example. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Let's have an example with robust. Thinking again about our cohorts in our meeting spaces, whether it's in a cohort or whether it's in the community. Think of the content as it being a robust content for everyone with all abilities to be able to put it to practice.
Esta es Marta. Hannah, ¿tenías una pregunta?
This is Martha. Hannah, did you have a question?
Gracias, Marta. I was just going to add to the previous comment, because it really struck an idea in my mind about building out agendas and actually incorporating time for questions, incorporating time to confirm clarity. And so, yeah, just wanted to say thanks to the previous speaker for bringing that up. And I think in regards to maybe the robust content, I thought about spatial awareness as we built it out on agendas, and blocking with text that's large enough and not too small, and also being aware of not using colors that are not easily seen by the majority, because I know from previous experience, like writing on a whiteboard, for example, in yellows or bright reds, not everyone can see that. And I was thinking too about how do we utilize agents such as this to provide services that they're already expertise in, so that someone like myself, where a lot of this is nuance and very it's an area of unfamiliarity, but wanting to incorporate like expertise in that so that people in the room have services that are complete and not just, partial, someone saying, oh, we're going to provide accessibility, but then not really following through with that, or what does accessibility look like in this context, and not really doing it to the best, giving it the best attention that it needs and deserves.
So for those of you that can see me, if you see me doing this, that means I'm in agreement, or I am happy, or that is a great thought. And so it's my way of not clapping. Clapping is disturbing to me cognitively, and it's not a good thing. The noise and the decibel level of people clapping is very interruptive to me. And so when I see this, it's a way of just in alignment and enjoy it. And we've talked about emails, we've talked about agendas, and Hannah, you bring an excellent point. And I'm going to add to that PowerPoints. We use a lot of PowerPoints in our projects and in the Cultivemos network. And you talked about white space, and it reminded me, and we're going to probably talk a little bit about that on our next slide. But for now, I think that we're here and we should talk about it, is when we're creating information for other people, is being mindful of the font size. A typical minimum font size for people with accessibility should be 18 to 20. What type of font should I use? Times New Roman, Arial, or those are the most common. If you can't have white space around your slides, that is a plus. If you could minimize pictures, that's even better. My grandson, who just recently moved in with me, looked at my PowerPoint presentation now versus when I used to do them for FEMA and the National American Red Cross, and they look very different. And he said, Abuelita, you're missing some pictures and some colors. Those look kind of boring. And he's 18. And I said, well, I've learned from then to now that all the pictures and all the pretty stuff and all the side by sides, if it's really tight and condensed, it's not very good for people. Hence today we're piloting the slides in 2 different ways, in 2 different languages, because we want to be mindful and be curious and explore and experiment with other ways of being accessible and more inclusive. To Hannah's point, we can say, we did this training today, check off the box. We're going to have an accessible space moving forward, and then put it to rest when the money runs out. And then we continue to do practice as we always have done. And so it's a real commitment, and it's being knowledgeable. That, again, I'm going to share resources in a few minutes that is going to talk about how they call the WCAG, and it's the Web Accessibility Guidelines, and be aware that those guidelines can be used in PowerPoints and emails, in all kinds of stuff. Now, it could get a little overwhelming. There's a lot of them. But I always say start with the first few. Think of font size. Think of white space around. Think of font type. Think of color. Think of pictures. Think about movement in the slides. What a lot of people don't notice is that when they have slides and flying in and running out, did you know that that can cause seizures for some people? And a lot of people don't know what they don't know. But my PowerPoint slides look very simple and very boring now than that they did years before, because now when I create a PowerPoint, must be plain concepts, must be understandable, must be robust and perceivable. It has to have what I need it to have, and I really need to take all the other stuff off. And it's a struggle and a challenge for me, because I love colorful PowerPoints and I love movement and pictures, but that is not what may be accessible to someone else. So Hannah, thank you for that. That was really, really helpful. I hope that this introduction to P.O.U.R has been helpful and has given individuals in the group an opportunity to look at ways in which we currently do things better than the way that we've been doing it. We've been doing great work. But how do we use this platform and foundation to make it even better and even stronger? Next slide, please.
Dr. Yvette, may I ask a question? This is Kansu.
Of course, please.
I'm trying to understand robust just a little bit better, in terms of the content. Am I understanding it to be like a diverse representation of the information that you're looking for so that many people can access it in different ways? Or is it that the content is full and interesting enough? Or is it more about the diversity of the content?
Great question. And I believe it's all of the above. You want something that is diversified. You want something that is clear, right? But I'm going to add one thing. And that one thing that I want to add is, does that information work with all people, all abilities? Does it work with assistive technology? Can I zoom in on what you just did? Can my screen reader read it to me? Does my plugin to magnify work with it? When I print it, is it coming out in a format that it doesn't lose its fidelity from the computer screen to a print format? That when I look at it on my desktop, does it look the same or close to it on my phone? Not everybody has a computer or a laptop. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I hear like a universal ability to hit everyone.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yes, yes. Anyone else would like to share what it means to them, what robust means to them? How are they hearing it? How are they perceiving it? How would you utilize it?
This is Angel. One thing that I'm thinking about is also like having an understanding of like how your material is limited. And I know that we've talked about this a lot in the context of language justice, but there's, you know, a lot of overlapping themes. But when, you know, at the end of this presentation, some of the resources we like don't have Spanish equivalents. And so we've like noted where like resources only in English. And so I'm thinking about it in the context of accessibility, that like when you are not able to provide, or like, yeah, it's important to have an understanding of like the limitations of what you're presenting and to be able to share with folks up front, like, this is a resource that I like got from a colleague, and like, I understand it might be hard to look at because the font's small, and I just want to give people a heads up and see if anyone, like, is there a way that I can support you in processing this information given what it looks like now, you know? So just like being able to like understanding that all of the materials that we're sharing aren't always going to be like perfectly or ideally formatted, and how, and just being prepared to like make space for like supporting the people in the virtual or in-person room and being able to absorb the information.
Angel, thank you for that, for adding that piece. I'm hearing you say, how do we take that information that may not be accessible for everyone, and how do we make it operable? And you mentioned a lot of possible ways and great examples and how we can do that. Because in reality, we know that creating accessible spaces is not always at the forefront of organizations or groups, and it doesn't always come with a budget. And it's not always on the first person language. What I mean by first person is I can say I am a person with a disability, or I can say I'm a Latinx person, or I can say I'm Yvette. And so depending on how I interact with someone, that need to be able to get that information that is operable for me, it's going to look different. And so thank you for that, because I think it's important to know that oftentimes resources are allocated for things in one language and not another, or for one group and not for another. And as we evolve and implement accessibility practices in our network, we have to be mindful that we need to take baby steps. It can't happen overnight, because it shouldn't be rushed. But it also should be paid attention to Hannah's point earlier, about being mindful about the continuity of doing this work. And so I just want to acknowledge that we may not have all the resources that we need or should have at the moment, but that does not mean that we continue to exercise other ways, diversify ways to get and arrive to where we need to be. Like Angel said, if the font is too little, can I read it to you? How can I make sure that you still get the information, but in another way? So thank you for that. Any other thoughts or comments before we go to our next slide? And I am being mindful of time, and promise that I will leave time for questions and get you out on time. And so this right here is really exciting to me. So what I would like to do is, having heard everything that you heard today, having heard everyone that has shared today, when you're thinking about creating accessible experiences within the Cultivemos network, or within your communities, or within your professional realm, whatever hat you wear. Martha's wearing maybe a researcher hat. And so as a researcher that collects data, that sends out surveys, how can Martha take what was presented today and go back and look and say, check, oh, maybe we could do this a little bit better. And so that applies to all of us, including me, who does this work all the time. Sometimes I have to check myself. So when you're thinking about cohort meetings or Zoom meetings, documents and presentations, or anything else, can everyone here at least name one thing, how they can create an accessible experience within the work that you're doing, whether in Cultivemos or somewhere else? So I'm going to open up. We don't have time to take every one of them individually, so I'm just going to invite whoever would like to share to pick one, or then there's a question mark on the fourth point to indicate that maybe you bring in your own thing. What is that one thing that you could do to have an accessible experience moving forward within your group?
Hola, hola.
Hi. Go ahead. Yeah.
Disculpe. Hola a todos. Habla
Sorry.
Michi.
Hi, everyone. This is
Y
Michi.
algo en que me quedé
And
pensando es
something that I kept thinking about
esta sugerencia de
was this
hacer la
suggestion
información comprensible.
of
Yo
making
como
information
ahorita, antes era
understandable.
agricultora y ahorita estoy
I used to
trabajando
be a
en
farmer, and
servicios
now I'm
para
working
agricultores. Yo he
in
aprendido como la idioma
services for
de,
farmers.
de,
And
de,
I've
um,
learned
de aplicar para fondos federales con el
about the language of
gobierno,
applying
y
for
eso puede
federal
ser
funding,
palabras muy
government funding,
complicados y
and it could include very
esa
complicated words.
información que lo está leyendo, tú sabes, gente que trabaja por
And
el
that's
gobierno, pero
information
cuando
that
ya estoy
people who are working
comunicándome con
for the
ellos,
government are reading.
cuando
But when I'm
estoy
not
comunicándome
communicating
con
with them,
otras
when I'm
mujeres como
communicating
Michi
with
o
other
la gente aquí
farmers
en
like
la red
myself, or
o
the
fuera de
people
la
within the
red,
network or out of the network,
básicamente tengo
I
como
basically
que apagar esa luz
have
y
to
prender otra
like
luz en mi cerebro
turn that switch off and turn another switch on in my brain. I don't have to use all those complicated words to communicate. I can say it in a simple language, in a simple way. And that is something that I would like to continue grounding on in my work.
Gracias, Michi.
Thank you, Michi.
¿Alguien más?
Anyone else?
This is Marta.
This is Marta.
Quisiera mencionar dos puntos.
I'd like to mention two
Primero,
things.
una práctica que me
First
parece
off, a
tan sencilla,
practice
pero a
that seems
veces,
so simple,
las cosas sencillas son las cosas que se
but
nos olvidan.
sometimes the simpler
Poner
things
los
are the
números
things that
a
we
las
forget.
páginas, ¿no? Cuando
To
tenés un documento.
number the
Porque otra
pages
vez,
when we
sobrecarga
have a
la
document.
información, ¿no?
Again,
Y es más
there's
fácil decirle a
an
alguien, en
information
vez de a la
overload, and
página
it's easier
5
to tell
o a la
someone, go to
página
page
7
5
o a
or
la
page
página
7
12 y
or
ahí
page
encuentras lo
12,
que tiene.
and there you can find
Para
what you
mí
need.
hay que ser bien intencional en poner
To
el
me,
número siempre.
we have to be very
Otra
intentional in
cosa
numbering the
que
pages
parte
always.
de mi experiencia en mi
Another
trabajo
thing
anterior
that's
es
part of my
el
experience in my
reconocer
previous
que
job
los colores
is
nos pueden
acknowledging
causar emociones, ¿no?
that colors can
Provocar emociones.
provoke
Por ejemplo, en mi trabajo
emotions.
anterior, el
For
color
example, in my
rojo
previous job,
es un
the
color que
color red
evitamos, porque para las
is a
personas
color that we use to
sobrevivientes de
avoid,
todo tipo de
because
violencia,
for people who
puede ser
are
un color que
survivors of any
despierte
kind of violence,
emociones
it can be a
dolorosas,
color that
de recuerdos
awakens
dolorosos. Entonces,
painful
el pensar en los colores
emotions or
y en pensar
painful
cosas
memories.
sencillas como
So
poner
thinking about colors,
número en las
thinking about
páginas,
simple
¿no?
things like
En la
numbering the
presentación,
pages
en
in a
cualquier
presentation,
documento que usemos.
in any type of document that we can use.
Gracias, Marta. Te lo agradezco un montón.
Thank you, Martha. I thank you a lot.
In my work as National American Red Cross Disability and Integration Head for the nation, one of the things that we did not use was red color either, although our logo was red, because of the feedback of pain and suffering. If you notice, when we were talking about the points here, some other people refer to these as bullets. Words have power, and we don't know people's history. And so I choose not to use the word bullet, because in some training, people have lost loved ones as a result of the bullet. And so they're very simple things in our language, in our processes, in our development, that if we are mindful, and sometimes if we just take the platinum rule and think about somebody else's story, where they've been or their experience, it will help us have more empathy and be able to meet people where they are at. To Michi's point, just changing big words, federal grants and federal words, and just simplifying them. What a gift that is to a rancher or farmer who may get lost in this grant application. And so those are small changes, but they are gifts and blessings to those of us who need them. And so thank you so much. And for homework. For homework, I would like to challenge those here and those who will be hearing the recording later, is to take some actionable next steps. And how could you do that? Either in your cohort or your community or in whatever hat you wear, whatever discipline that you're in, whatever role you're playing here, is to take an action step when you're thinking about network or statewide or community-wide initiatives to provide ongoing support. What could be some of the next steps? Well, some of the next steps that you could do and think about for homework is look at something that you're currently doing. Pick one thing, whether it's a cohort meeting, whether it's a presentation, whether it's a meeting with your colleague, pick whatever it is, pick one thing and say, I'm used to doing this way. Based on the practices that I've learned today, how can I make what I have always been doing and do it a little bit different so that it fits into what we are learning? How can I think of that person or a group of people who may need me to write it differently spell it differently, modify it? How can I take what I have and see it through the lens where people can use all their senses to be able to take what I'm teaching, what I'm offering, and take it in and understand it. So that is your homework for the day or for the week or for the month. And it's something that is very, very small, but sometimes when we know about certain things as a refresher, or maybe we didn't know and it's new, it helps us put into perspective how other people may be viewing things, processing things, and taking things in. And I hope and pray that this information today will be able to be a guide to help you be more inclusive, and have people be able to have access in more accessible ways to whatever it is that you're gifting them with, because you're a gift and you're a blessing to them. And so next slide, please. Our next slide are some resources. The first one is American Sign Language. And American Sign Language is for those people who communicate with nonverbal language. And it is has a whole bunch of list of interpreters for any language outside of English or Spanish. But they also have a lot of resources, so I invite you to look at them here. People with low vision impairment even use sign language. So it's not for just people who can't hear or are low of hearing. It's also for people that have low vision. And so being mindful that it's something that we often don't use in this Cultivemos space, but I'm hoping that in the future, as our funding provides and we bring people in, that we're able to offer services and projects that bring in the communities that we traditionally have not served. And so that ASL may be an application. Real-time captioning signage. For those, I saw a lot of projects. I review a lot of projects where people were doing activities and trainings and events and all these things, making sure that signage is appropriate so that people can see it from afar and that it is in the right color and in the right font. So they have, this is a site that has all kinds of sample signage that is appropriate for communities that have accessibility needs. The next point is around people's first language, how people like to be sort of addressed in what that language is, whether it's I'm Yvette, whether I'm a person with a disability. The goal here is to see people for who they are, as in, with all the abilities that they bring with them, even when there are limitations. Because if we think about it, we all have limitations. The other one is around inclusive design when creating different things, making sure that we have inclusive design. The next one, the WCAG, is the one I've talked about a few times. It's specifically around web design. It's a big, big tool, but you could definitely use a lot of this to create PowerPoints and emails and groups and curriculums. And the last one is around the ADA information hotline. So if you ever have a question, you have a comment, you have a need, and you can access me to help you, or you can access Angel or our team, feel free to reach out. It is a great way to get additional information right from the folks who work on this on a day-to-day basis. Next slide, please. And at this time, I would like to just say thank you for your attention, your participation, and open it up for any questions or feedback that you may have. And if you want to stay connected and learn more about the work that we do, on the next slide, we have a QR code that you can scan so that you can stay connected, learn more about our work. And also, if you need help with any accessibility concerns or consulting or coaching, is a way to reach out to us. I would love to open it up to the group and say thank you and see if there are any questions.
This is Angel. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, Michi, if you want to stop sharing yours too.
Questions or feedback, comments? Maybe Each person can share one takeaway from today's session. We could start there since we have short time.
Hi, I'll jump in. I just want to say thank you so much for this training. This was really great. And taking away from this, for me, was U and R of the P.O.U.R. Of those are things that I think are hard for me to understand. They're a little bit more conceptual, ephemeral. I'm a hard to understand person sometimes, so I think those are things that are hard to understand for me. So trying to put those into practice for the people around me and the community around me, I think will be really important. So thank you for that.
Anyone else?
Esta es Marta. Mil gracias, doctora Ivette.
This is
Me
Marta.
recuerda que no tengo que ser
Thank you so much, Dr.
cómoda,
Everett,
¿no? Porque
for reminding
es
me
fácil
that I don't need to be
acomodarse
comfortable because it's easy to
y
get
hacer
comfortable
lo que siempre se ha hecho,
and do
pero esto me
what
recuerda
has
que a
always
veces
been done.
no debo
But
de
this
ser cómoda.
reminds me that
La
I cannot
incomodidad
fall
en esto es hacer justicia. ¿Ya? Que si
into
tengo
that.
que estar
Uh,
incómoda,
Getting too comfortable in this would
mil
be an
gracias.
injustice. And if I have to be uncomfortable, then let's go ahead. Thank you so much.
This is Hannah. I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Yvette and the entire translation team, and the team Cultivemos that was able to offer this training and making it accessible because it was free and virtual, for recording. And I think a takeaway for me is just a larger awareness on the things that I can do to incorporate accessibility into the work for the farmers and just in my daily life and interactions with people on a daily basis. So thank you for that.
This is Angel. I feel really excited that we were able to host this training, and I feel really grateful for your leadership on this, Dr. Yvette. And I feel like a big sense of like relief and excitement that we have this like recorded thing to share with the many members of our network who have been like asking for support and making their work more accessible. I think it's been really helpful for me. Like to like also have like more consistent language that I can pull from when talking about or when like talking with cohort leads and trying to support them and making their work more accessible. That feels, I feel a lot of relief and excitement around that. So excited to move forward.
I want to be mindful that it is 8 o'clock, and would love to hear from anyone else if they want to speak or if anyone wants to reach out via email. That is completely acceptable. I can find the chat here in a minute and put in my email address. Is there my email? Let me put my email. And if anybody has any questions, if you didn't scan the code, you could email me here. Just know that email is not something that I do on a daily basis. I have a delayed response given my limitations. But I will welcome any feedback, comments, or if there's a question or something that you may need, I would love to be there to support you. And I want to just thank the Cultivemos leadership and the language justice team for allowing this to take place and to water the seeds that started to what it has evolved to be today and what it will continue to be. And so thank you to all. And Angel, I pass it to you to close, and thank you.
Oh, sure. This is Angel. I don't have anything exciting to say, but I just, again, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Dr. Yvette, for putting so much work into this. And yeah, I'm excited also to have folks not even from the Cultivemos network in the room, and that was very fun. Yeah, and I hope everyone enjoys their afternoon, evening, depending on where you are. But have a good rest of your day. We lost her.
But yay! Eso fue tan genial. Qué bonito fue eso. That was really sweet. Very, very, very sweet. Interpretation was so beautiful. All the onion analogy, Joel, y'all interpreted that in such a tender way, not to be puntastic, because onions are tender. They got many layers. And Selena, the language here is so profound, and it's not simple. It's not simple. It's so, again, tender, very sensitive, and y'all held it down so beautifully. So I was on that Spanish channel the entire time. Michi, yes to Spanish first. That was so beautiful, so brave of you. And I'm definitely projecting here. And it was perfect. It was perfect. And that was my cat. Yes. Frida also loves it. Okay, ahí ya voy a dejar de compartir y voy a dejar nuestro documento de flores y semillas ahí en el chat.
Yes, thank you. Pretty soon I won't be able to say that my español es muy ratata como Cardi B. But yeah,
Thank you for
team.
those affirmations.
Yes. Thank you for holding it down, doing what you do, flowing, honestly, in all of you as well, because I got that LJ training last year and I was like, I wonder how I would say this. And then y'all said it. And I was like, that was just so fast. Like your brains just work on a different level. Yes, yes. Love it. But yes, we'll be sure to pop back in the Flores y Semillas stock. If we need to add anything from our part, the nuestra parte, we will do it. But other than that, y'all feel free to get on out of here. Be gone. Scram. Go enjoy your brat girl summer.
Yes, thank you also for flowing with the many roadblocks to getting things to you in any kind of on time or early. And it really, yeah, I feel like it was beautiful to see all the fruits of all of our labor pay off in this small but mighty session with so much participation. Michi and I were texting about people just interrupting each other to participate, which I feel like is not always the vibes we get in Cultivemos, so it was really sweet. So just thank you for being there and for bearing witness. But yes, we should all relax now.
Thank you for creating the space. I really enjoyed this training and learned a lot. It was beautiful. Thank you. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your week.
Peace, y'all. Also, just the little sprinkles on top, also the double screen share, double recording, y'all did that. And that's a dope precedent to set, because I do think que esto puede ser a lo largo, if this is available as a resource for folks long term, is really, yeah, it's accessible. So, buenas noches, sending y'all much love, gratitude, vemos por ahí.